Our next speaker will be Maureen Olivero, who will speak on lessons on survival. Miss Olivero received her brother's kidney in 1971 after only 1.5 months of dialysis. Prior to having end stage renal disease, she led an active, normal life. Decisions regarding education, sports, marriage, children, and career have been influenced by complications regarding transplantation. However, during the past 24 years, she has remained active and maintained a normal lifestyle. She is now married, has no children, is a doctoral student, and works full time in California as a family therapist. She also serves as an international consultant, specializing in work with families who have children with special needs. In addition to all this, she won 4 gold medals today in swimming. Ladies and gentlemen, Maureen Olivero.
Hi, it's nice to see you, and I'm glad I made it here. I just got out of the pool, so I'm here and ready and willing to talk. And I want to say that I'm standing up here probably only because I've been surviving longer than most of you at having a transplant since I had mine in 1971. Doesn't mean I know anymore. It just means I've been doing it a longer period of time, and also a little bit because I have taken what I've learned and turned it into a profession. And I work with families who do have children with long-term disabilities. So I've been able to take it and turn it around and use it to my advantage, which I think is one of the lessons to survival. Someone asked me at the pool what I was going to, when they heard my topic and they didn't want to come, they said, what are the keys? And I said, well, there really aren't any keys. And then I was thinking about it. And I thought if I had to put it into a couple of words, I'd say it really boils down to accommodating and celebrating. That we have to learn to accommodate to all the changes that take place in our life because of a transplant, and that we have to take time like today to celebrate. So I'm very proud of the fact that I did win 4 gold medals and 1 silver medal. So I did actually, we forgot that one, but I did do that. So I am taking the time to celebrate. I also celebrate in by ways of having my mother sitting in the audience, and we had a special T-shirt made for her, so everyone would know this is my mother here, sitting here. She's got my medals on, and it's thank you. Her little shirt, it says, "My daughter got her kidney from my son in 1971." So there are lots of things you can do to celebrate. You can find other people to be around and to celebrate and to help. I work real well by having people ask questions. You'll first find that I'm not type A, so this is probably much slower paced than the was it Alan? Yeah, than Alan. I did hear some of that, but what I and one of the things he said that I'd like to deal with a little more specifically, which I think is I have found over the years has been left out when we talk with people who have had transplants, is that we neglect the feelings of those people, those of us who have had transplant, that we don't face the reality of that. That, as Alan was saying, dealing with stress means dealing with feelings. We're not good in our society at dealing with feelings, and so for the last hour and a half, it's been pretty somewhat lighthearted, and you've joked around. It's been humorous, and humor is absolutely essential. It is essential to find the good, find the humorous, find the funny, and all the things that happen to us, because you never know what's going to happen to us from one day to the next. However, for this part of my talk, I'd like to stress the serious side of it and the feelings that come along that are often neglected, which is one of the reasons I wanted to be up here today. Can I just, I don't know, how many of you have had a transplant sitting in the audience? Great. And how many family members do we have? Okay, so we got about half and half. Another person just walked in. My husband just walked in too. So I want to acknowledge him in the back. He's got on my silver medal. How that happened? My mother has my 4 golds. My husband has my silver. I don't know how it turned out that way, but that's how we ended up the afternoon. But I would like to say that if you at any time want to stop, ask me questions or ask questions of them, please feel free, because I think that's one of the things we can do is to share with each other. And it is a small crowd tonight, so we can do that. What I have come to in my practice as a family therapist and in my life as being a person with a long-term disability, and I don't deny that fact. I think this is a long-term disability. A transplant is not a cure, it's a treatment. is absolutely, in my opinion, is absolutely not a cure, and that we should not baby ourselves by thinking that it is. Because as time gets by, I'm here to say that there are lots and lots of side effects and more accommodations that have to be made. So it is definitely not a cure. But what I have found is that we go through a process of what I think is a process of grieving when we receive a transplant. That, as I found with families who have children with disabilities, they are grieving, and that we who have received transplants and those of us who have are family members of people with transplants are also grieving. And what we grieve, we're grieving over a lost dream, that we had a dream for a child, we have a dream for ourselves and what we want to do, what we want to become. And at some point in time, when we realize we need a transplant, that dream is shattered. And the rest of our life is spent in accommodating and developing new dreams, setting new goals, and making new dreams and trying to reach them. If we don't grieve over those lost dreams, then we stay lost in the past and we can't attach to new dreams. As Alan was saying, children express emotions the best. Children also grieve the best. So children who receive transplants are probably the best at coming to terms with it. And some people say that we need to accept this fact. I will never accept the fact that I have a transplant. Anyone that says to me that the end point of grieving to me is denying the fact that I'm still going to have feelings over it as time goes on. So I will never expect myself to accept the fact I've had a transplant. I don't regret the fact that I've had a transplant. There are many, many things that have come into my life because of a transplant that I would never have had if I hadn't had one. But if I had it to do over again and it was my plan, I would not have had a transplant. And I think that's important for us to come to terms with and to recognize. In this process of grieving and letting go, I think there are stages or phases that we go through, and that what we can do is acknowledge the phases and acknowledge the feelings that come with those phases, realize that they serve a purpose, that they're there to get us somewhere and to get us on to the next step, to help us reattach and make those new dreams. For me, as a child, I dreamed of getting married. I dreamed of having children. I wanted to be an English teacher. That dream was shattered when I was 18. Things were put on hold. Parts of it I continued to do. I continued to go to school. I continued to have a social life. I continued to go on. One of the side effects of the medication that I take is that my body is sterile. I can't have any children. So I have had to reaccommodate that. I've had to take a look at my life, of what my beliefs are, what my thoughts are. If I continue to dream of having children of my own biologically, then I would continue to live in the past. I had to let go of that dream and find some new ones. So what I have done is I've taken my love of children. I've found that I have motherly instincts that I didn't think I could ever have, but I found those and I'm using them in the work that I do. I can't tell you how often I use those motherly instincts without having biological children. I use them every day on adults who are grieving over the fact that their children have disabilities. So I've taken parts of my dream and woven them into a new dream. But I had to do that by letting go of the first dream and letting go of what was going on with me at that time. Part of the process, back to the process of what do we go through, I think there are phases. I think they happen forever, for the rest of our life. They never stop. They get thrown up again. They're a series of emotions that we go through every time we go to a new doctor, every time we have to go to a doctor appointment, every time we have to tell our story over again. We may go through some of those feelings again. Every time we change jobs, every time we think of changing jobs, every time we try to make new decisions, we're going to have to be faced with some of the thoughts and emotions that come up again. Typically, the first phase that we go through is a phase of denial. It's real hard to deny that we've had a transplant, so we kind of skip over that phase. Although I'm finding that as time and the years go by, I do periodically and in subtle ways deny the fact that I've had a transplant. I don't talk about it at work. There are very few people know that I've had a transplant until depends on who read the paper a couple of days before I came here as to who may or may not know now at this point. But it's not something that everyone where I work knows about. It's not something I talk about. If I were to think about my transplant and the fact of it every morning when I get up and take the medication, then I probably would be in a perpetual depression. But I don't do that. So we don't think about it. I think most of you don't think about it every day when you go through that. So there are subtle ways that we actually deny a transplant. I think the next phase, though, is the fact that we accept the fact that we've had a transplant, but then we get to a point of saying, okay, but it doesn't really make any difference to me in my life. I don't have to make any accommodations. I don't have to make any changes. Life's going to go on just like it did. Not so. There, we have to make accommodations. We have to go to doctor's appointments. We have to make time for doctor's appointments. We may have to readjust our eating. We may have to take time during parts of our day to rest. I know for me, it's real important that I get more rest than I ever needed in the past. There are many, many accommodations that we have to make. It affects the choices that we make in whether or not we're. Some days I have so little energy, I really have to decide if I'm going to write a letter that day because I don't have that energy. I may need it for something else later in the day. So it really does affect what we do, and we have to make accommodations for that. Once we can get through and say, okay, yes, I've had a transplant, no doubt about that, and it does make a difference. I'm going to have to do things. Then we get to the point of saying, but it doesn't matter. I don't have any feelings about this. I can make these changes. I can live with this. I can take this medication. I can go to the doctor, but I don't really care. I don't have feelings. That's total denial, and that's wrong. And I think we need to get through that. We need to say, yep, I do have feelings about this. One of the hard parts for transplant patients to get to that point is that how can I have so-called negative feelings about this when I should be grateful that I'm still alive? That I should be grateful to the people that don't, to the family that donated, to the donor, to, in my case, to my brother. How can I be angry sometimes that I've had a transplant? How can I think it's not fair when I'm still alive and he's gave me one of his kidneys to keep me alive? But I can't deny my own self the right to have those feelings. There are times when, yes, I am angry about this. But what anger does is it helps me to recognize and readjust my idea of what's fair in the world. That before my transplant, I thought that these kinds of things weren't fair. It wasn't fair this happened to me. It is not fair that it happens to someone else. Now I see that fairness really doesn't have a whole lot to do with it. But I have allowed myself to express that anger and to get through that so that I am at the point. And I've also taken that around and changed that into a positive so that now I can work with families who have children that are disabled as a result of their parents abusing them. That to me in the past would not have seemed fair. But because of what I've gone through, I think I have a better ability to be non-judgmental of other people, that I can take that and turn that into a real positive. One of the other feelings that we have sometimes is and oftentimes for me is feelings and periods of depression. And I think periods of depression are normal. I'm here to tell you you're not crazy because you go through them. And those of you that are family members, the people that you know that have had transplants, they're not crazy when they have these feelings. And depression is often a time when we are feeling incompetent and we're feeling incapable and we have no self-confidence. And if we throw those three things together, then obviously we're going to go into a depression. And what we can do for ourselves is to try to find and reach out and dig down deep and try to accomplish even the littlest thing that's going to bring back our self-confidence, that's going to say, yep, I can do this. This past spring, I know, was real difficult for me medically, and I was getting very depressed. And actually, this was last summer when this was happening. And what I did, as crazy as it sounds, is that I enrolled in a doctoral program. Now, enrolling in a doctoral program seems a little overwhelming when I'm working full time, having health problems, and totally depressed. But what it did was show me that I made myself do this. It showed me that I was capable of doing it. I gained some self-confidence. I also found that I was far more capable and competent than a lot of other people in the doctoral program. That here I was going to school full time. I was working full time. I had medical problems. They were taking sick days to write papers when I'm trying desperately to save my sick days to be sick, so that I had to get my papers written and all my work done. when the time allotted, and I didn't take extra time. The other thing I found about having a transplant is because you take each minute so seriously is that you are very well organized and you do plan your time much better. And I think I use my time wisely, although my husband will probably disagree with that at some points. But I try to use my time as wisely as possible. But enrolling in the program showed me that I gave me back my confidence and helped me to feel confident again. The other thing when you're feeling depressed is to find someone who's going to give you the encouragement, that's going to give you the self-confidence, or that's just going to agree to be there to get you through this period of time. I know one of the things that happened with me, and it's very important to me that I pick doctors that not only know what they're talking about medically, but that I can also talk to as a person, that they understand that I know my body better than they know my body. They have the technology, they know the medicine, but I know my own body much better than they do. And I've been fortunate over the years that I do have the confidence to change doctors if I don't feel comfortable with one. I will change, and I think that's real important to surviving. And the doctor that I have now, I was having struggling a lot this spring with some problems. And every time I'd see him, which was weekly at this point, he'd say, "Are you swimming yet? Are you back in the water? You have to get out there. I know you want to go to Atlanta." So he really kept encouraging me to do this. And one day I just burst into tears and I said, after 25 years, I'm real tired of struggling. And he put his hands on his hips and did just what was perfect for me. And he put his hands on his hips and he said, I don't want to disturb you, but I intend to keep you around for another 25 years. And that's just what I needed to hear at the time. In my depression, I needed to seek out someone who was going to encourage me to keep going and who was going to do it in a way that he knew was going to work with me. And that's the kind of relationship you need with a doctor and with people around you. You can't go through this alone. You can't get through these phases alone. You can't get through these feelings without having someone else in your life that's going to help you do that. And it's very difficult for other family members to help you through because they're also struggling and getting through at the same time. And they're not going through it in the same order and in the same fashion or for the same reason, but they're going through the process, serves a purpose for their life. I know for many years, my father introduced me as his daughter who had the kidney transplant. That used to really irritate me because I am so much more than a person who had a kidney transplant. There is so much more to who I am. And yet I came to the point of realizing that that was important for my father, that that was a source of pride for him, and that it was okay that he needed that because he needed that in his life, and that was okay. And what I found from that too is that sometimes the people he said that to turned out to have had someone in their life that was struggling with a disease of some sort or that was in need of a transplant. Somehow the information he passed on by bringing it up was okay. One of the things that's difficult for us as transplants is that we don't have a lot of control over our life, and we don't have a lot of control over our body in particular. So we try real hard and real desperately to control other parts. And I know one of the things I've learned I can't control is who knows about my transplant and what they know. I can control how much I say, but I know that my husband needs to talk to people about it and that I'm not the best one to talk to because he's so afraid of what might happen to me that if I talk to him and I see him become afraid, then I get afraid, and it doesn't do either one of us any good. So I know that he needs an outlet for that. He plays on a senior men's softball league, and I know he needs to go play softball 3 days a week. There are certain things that he needs in his life to do that I have no control over, but he needs to go through that. My mother needs to go through it in her ways, and she needs to tell who she wants to tell. She needs to talk to who she needs to talk to. I can't control that, and I know it's going to help them in the long run. There is lots that we can control, however. Some of it we have to make choices and use our integrity about what we have control over. And I have some real in my life have had some very intense times of what I've chosen to control that was bad and what I've chosen to control that has turned out well. And I think it's important to look and think about the consequences. I have gone through at least 3 periods of time in the last 24 years where I chose to control what was going on by stopping taking my medication. That was not the way to try to gain control. Thank goodness that God watches over me and must have other plans because nothing happened in the meantime. And I would only do it for 2 or 3 days at a time before I would think about the consequences. But that's not the way to control it. I have a lot of control over what I eat, in spite of the fact that I'm on a low protein diet and low sodium because I'm now losing this kidney, and they don't know how much longer it's going to last. So, even though I'm on a restricted diet, I have control over when I choose to go out to dinner, what I choose to eat at home, and I have a lot of ways that I can control that. I have been very fortunate to make choices to travel all over the world. I have My husband and I spent 4 months living in Taiwan while he was working there. I took 6 months off and we lived in Taiwan for 4 months. Then I went with my mother and took her to Sweden and traveled for a month to visit family, which in turn led me to a job in Sweden for 3 months at a time. I will periodically make choices to take time out and to go and work and live in other places. On one of our trips, my husband and I were living in Bangkok, and I came down with a staph infection and ended up in the hospital in Bangkok, Thailand. That's a scary thought. But what happened, as it turned out, is all of those doctors had been trained in the United States. I had a nephrologist, I had a transplant doctor, I had so much good care for so little money, I'd say, that it turned into be a very wonderful experience, even though it was frightening in the beginning. I also, this last fall, went on a work and witness mission to Albania. And a lot of people thought I was crazy going to Albania because it's just a new country, a new developing country. It's so poor, it's so dirty. And my immune system is so shot that it could have been looked at as probably a bad choice on my part to go there, but I didn't think so. I trusted my own integrity, and I trusted my ability to take care of myself after all these years, that I would know what to eat and what not to eat. And if I went without eating for 2 weeks, that's okay. But that wasn't going to happen because I also take a lot of nuts, non-salted nuts and things with me. And the woman that went along on the trip with me also, that we lived with a couple of missionaries there, her whole suitcase was packed with goodies just in case she didn't like the Albanian food. Not because she had a special diet, she was just afraid she wasn't going to like anything there. So it turned out that it was the right choice for me to do. It was the right decision. It was the right place to go to. I think that the hardest feeling for me to deal with is the fear. And making those choices like I did to continue my life, to go on, takes a lot of digging deep and finding the courage to go on in spite of being afraid. And to me, that's what courage is. It doesn't take any courage to go anywhere, do anything if you're not afraid, but it takes a lot of courage when you are. And those of us that have had transplants, in my opinion, are courageous every single day, because we continue to go on in spite of what's going on with ourselves, with our bodies, in spite of not knowing what the future is going to hold. We go on every day. And I think that's probably what has gotten me through the last 24 years, that somehow I have found the courage and the support from those around me that give me the courage to go on. I want you to know that part of my new dream and the dream for my life at this stage is to be known as someone who is full of compassion and courage and touch the hearts of others. And I hope that somehow in this short presentation this evening that I have been able to make it somehow meaningful for you and touch your life in some way. And I am very open to any questions or suggestions. There's often lots of questions for someone that's had a transplant for so long, but I don't know. So anyone have any questions or anything I can answer before we let you go? Or questions for my mother or for my husband? Yeah, Alan. Probably the biggest way is that I have developed a very strong faith in God, and that I trust that He has a plan that I don't know about, and that He knows what tomorrow is going to bring, and I don't. And that's how I'm going to get through. That is the biggest way that I get through the fear. Um, yeah, sure. I guess there's a couple of things that come through my mind is that depending on what your intention is for the group, and if your intention is to celebrate, then that's one thing, and there are ways of celebrating. Support groups are not, in my opinion, not the way to celebrate. Support groups are the way to have a safe environment to share feelings that are coming up for those of us that are going through this. And I believe that if you do have a support group, it needs to be run by a person who is experienced at running support groups and knows exactly how to handle that and how to handle the differences. Because my guess is that by bringing up issues of, well, I'm different from you because I had a liver, or and you're different and you don't understand because you had a kidney, are not necessarily truly different. Those, that's just a symptom of feelings that are beneath that have been unable to be shared, that there are a lot of feelings underneath that, and I don't know what they might be. They'd be different for each person, but it would take someone who is trained to facilitate a support group in order to bring those to the surface, as opposed to the bickering about, I'm not the same as you are. And I think that the transplant games are an example of how we are celebrating how we are all the same, and that it doesn't really make a difference. And I know there was some controversy over having bone marrow donors and bone marrow recipients here, because they don't take the same medication that we have to take, and so they don't suffer the side effects, and therefore their bodies are not as deteriorated as ours. But I think what we can see from them being here, from us all being here, that it really doesn't matter. We are here to celebrate that we are surviving and having that second chance. So I guess my suggestion would be to separate a support group from a celebration. Uh-huh. Exactly. A- and I hear the frustration too of that, and it's almost of not being accepted. Again, I think that goes back to the feelings that are coming up from those other people. There's a fear of looking at kidney transplant patients sometimes from other people. That might be a fear that I'm not going to do as well as you do because our chances aren't as good. It's a reminder that the chances aren't as good. Maybe, I don't know exactly. Maybe some anger that it's not fair. You lost a kidney, but I lost a heart. I mean, there's maybe some of that unfairness. Sure, exactly. Exactly, exactly. And that might be some of it. And again, to me, it's not the fact that there is that disagreement, but that what's the feeling? What are the feelings that are beneath that? And how can you get a facilitator that's going to help you to bring those out? Not getting support at home in terms of family. Yeah, yeah. What I try to do, or what I would do, is try to find someone in your community that you have heard, or that comes highly recommended or recommended, that has worked with people and been with people that have gone through periods where they've had a disability or they're living with a long-term disability, and try to find someone in that is a professional that could help you get through some of that. And it's very difficult because there are not a lot of people trained to work with those of us that are living with long-term disabilities. And I believe it's much different than any other type of counseling. I believe it takes someone that's trained to do that. So that would be my suggestion, to try to find a professional to do that. Try to find a friend who's empathetic